Good afternoon, everybody. It's David Schlotthauer here with another detailed tropical weather outlook and discussion for Monday, July 28th, 2025. In this tropical weather update, I'm going to give you the very latest information on all of these tropical waves that will be moving off of Africa in the next 2 to 3 weeks as we near the peak of the Atlantic hurricane season. Could any of these tropical waves develop into tropical depressions or tropical storms through the middle of August? In this update, we will be breaking down all those details to see on who and where could these waves actually develop and impact. Now, if you haven't been here before and you do find these tropical weather outlook and discussions very helpful, detailed, informative, and life-saving, please don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Slap that bell notification icon to get all of my notifications every time I go live within 24 to 36 hours before a landfalling hurricane impacts your area. Hit the like button and also leave a comment in the section below this video as we are nearing 50,000 subscribers. Now, with that being said, here's a look at the latest GOES 19 True Color Visible Satellite Imagery provided by Dr. Levi Cowan at tropicaltidbits.com. Link in the description below this video. And what we have going on right now, there is quite a bit to talk about in today's video. First of all, we have a tropical wave that is located right now to the northeast of Puerto Rico, portions of the Dominican Republic, as well as the Greater Antilles. This is not likely to develop, but it looks a bit spicy here on the satellite imagery this afternoon. While we have a very strong tropical wave right now that has emerged off of Africa with all the deep convection there, and there's a mid-level swirl that is in place. That's going to be the one that we're going to talk about in today's video, with additional powerful tropical waves that will be coming off of Africa in the next couple of weeks that we will also need to talk about in today's update. So it does look like now the Atlantic is slowly waking up and flipping its gears into a busy period that is coming. Now, with that being said, you all absolutely enjoyed when we looked at all of the 5 global computer models in yesterday's video. We're going to do the same in today's video since I want to be thorough, I want to be accurate and honest with you all with my own opinion on what I think is going to develop in the next couple of weeks here. So of course, we're going to start with the European model, then we're going to look at our AI model, artificial intelligence, then the GFS model, the Canadian model, and then of course we're going to be looking at the ICON model because again, I want to be thorough with all of the 5 global models that we're going to be taking a look at in today's video. So here's a look at the European model, the more accurate version of any of the global computer models that I'm going to be showing you in today's video. And this is a look at the surface wind plot at 10 meters above the surface or 33 feet above ground or above the waters here. And this is what we have. We have an entanglement of vorticity that is bundled up down here along the intertropical convergence zone. Now, while this does look very healthy, models have really backed off on any chances of development of this tropical wave down here moving off of Africa, which I'm a little surprised about given how moist the atmosphere is actually. But I do understand because the MJO is not really ideally favorable in this portion of the Atlantic just yet, but that will be changing in the next couple of weeks as we move into middle of August. So putting this into motion here, you can see there's that tropical wave that does try to develop here, but each attempt, this does not look to be successful at all. It's very broad and loose in terms of the structure of the wave, with strong easterly winds helping to prevent that development. Very light southwesterly flow coming around this wave pocket, meaning that the wave is not very organized, it's not very sharp, and it doesn't look like it's going to do much, at least on approach to the Lesser and Greater Antilles as we move this forward. And when this does approach the Greater Antilles, let's go into the Caribbean on this sector. You can see by Saturday morning in about 5 days, this is where it would be at here. And you can see there is definitely a wave pocket here. It's not like we're seeing smooth easterly winds moving through this. There is southeasterly flow here, and then there is east-northeasterly flow here, and this is where our wave pocket actually is. So there will be some showers, there will be some thunderstorms, and there will be some breezy winds depending on how this all evolves. but it doesn't look like we will see a tropical depression or tropical storm out of this. But that does not mean we won't see any development through the rest of August, because we will be looking at the models here further out in time beyond the 5-day forecast, because of that MJO that's coming along into the Atlantic. That's why we need to look very, very far out in time. But right now it looks like with this first powerful tropical wave, doesn't look like anything will develop off of it. And as we go into the next 7 days here, the wave does not develop at all as it moves into the Bahamas. But there are some other models that do suggest otherwise, that could develop pretty significantly as it moves near the Bahamas into southern Florida and into the Gulf. And then beyond that, looks like things will be a lot quieter. But here's a little bit of a caveat to all of this. As we take a look at the central Atlantic, take note, here are the Lesser and Greater Antilles. Here are the Leeward, Windward Islands in the Eastern Caribbean. Just for reference, we're looking at the central Atlantic. Behind this tropical wave right here, so there's the first wave pocket that's going to roll through, and then there is a potential another area of disturbed weather we are going to need to be keeping a close eye on. This is beyond the 10-day forecast, so we need to understand here that this is fantasy land. There's a lot of uncertainty in the modeling beyond 10 days, and we clearly see that with our tropical wave that is coming off of Africa literally last night, that, oh, now all the models are backing off on it. We were thinking that, wow, this could become a tropical storm or even a hurricane. Since then, things have changed in the last couple of days on that wave. Same thing could always happen with this tropical wave that comes off of Africa in about 7 days. This is too far out, but the European model being this bullish is something that we have taken into consideration. Even so, our other models are not on par with this. You know how accurate the European model can be sometimes, and that's why we have to take that into consideration. But here's the 10-day forecast right here showing a very weak tropical depression with winds of about 25 or so knots at this time. And then putting this into motion, this does try to develop into a tropical storm with winds of about 40 to 45 miles an hour. But please take note and use this with caution. This is the 10th of August, 312 hours out. So this is very, very far out in time. There's going to be a lot that changes with this. But it is something to take into consideration as we get into that busy period. The MJO, lots of rising motion over Africa. We have to really watch things out there in the deep tropics, even so this is far out in time, right? And then at the very end of the model, use this again with caution, 360 hours out. What did I just say? 360 hours out. This is Tuesday morning on the 12th of August. This is about the middle of August of the 8th month of the year, and we still have a long way to go. But this gives us a clue that this could be something that we may be dealing with in future model runs, that, wow, the tropics and the Atlantic are actually going to be waking up as we get into near the peak of hurricane season. And traditionally, around the middle of August is when we take that big climb upward in tropical activity. And Dr. Bill Gray would ring his bell on the 21st of August and say, this is the official rapid ramp up in tropical activity. And we are very close to that. So it is to be announced, and this is to be aware of, that we have to watch this. There are previous model runs that back this up too. This is the 12Z run for today. This is the 0Z run from yesterday. You can see where our tropical wave is in the Eastern Caribbean. And if we look at the 12Z run before that, look what we have. This is much further north. So in the last 3 model runs, we have had a strong tropical wave, a tropical depression, or tropical storm on approach to the Greater and Lesser Antilles in around the middle of August. Okay, so there's a lot to change here when it comes to the models, and we'll see if this sticks in future model runs from the deterministic Euro. Okay, but it's something to consider, not just the wave that's coming off of Africa now, but we have to look out beyond that for more additional chances of development. So now let's take a look here at the artificial intelligence model, because this is showing something entirely different. And again, I will caution you all that anything beyond 10 days out, see my fingers, 10 days out is extremely uncertain, all right? And people will be posting crazy model runs showing Cat 4 hurricane hitting Florida or Cat 5 hurricane hitting somewhere in the United States. Please use those posts with caution, as we are very far out from this even developing into anything significant. So, of course, when we look at the European artificial intelligence model, there is strong agreement that this is not going to develop into anything significant over the next 5 days, although it is a nice looking tropical wave here on the APHIS model or artificial intelligence. Moving this even forward into day 7, right about in here. This is about as far as most people will go with their forecast when it comes to predicting things. But there is a narrow window of opportunity out here in the southwestern Atlantic into the northeastern Gulf, where this wave might end up developing once it gets past whatever islands are over here in any part of the Caribbean or parts of Puerto Rico or the Dominican Republic. And it might find itself in a better environment over here near Florida. Doesn't mean it will develop under that favorable environment, but it's just a clue that we look for. Now, beyond the 7-day forecast, I know I shouldn't be going that far out in time, but there is enough confidence, enough consistency amongst the artificial intelligence model that there is a slim possibility. And an artificial intelligence model shouldn't be 100% relied on, but it is important to know that this has been pretty consistent over the last couple of days at showing maybe a tropical depression approaching portions there of the Bahamas and southern Florida. We showed this in yesterday's video. In fact, if we look back at that, this was, this was yesterday's model run, and you can see how it clipped the southern end of Florida. In today's model run, it's a lot weaker, but it gives us an idea that it could develop. And then once it gets into the Gulf, if it does at all, it could develop into at least a tropical depression or storm in about 360 hours. But this is very, very, very far out. We're again looking at Tuesday morning on the 12th day of August. The GFS model is extremely conservative, which is quite oddly and awkward enough, given that it has a convective bias on this. So given the fact that it doesn't show anything means that the GFS does think that there won't be much of an MJO moving into this area of the Atlantic or Africa. And the background environment looks to be extremely hostile, which is potentially an outlier. We'll see, though, which model is correct, if it's going to be the deterministic Euro or the GFS, the American model. But putting this into motion, you can see there's our tropical wave. This looks a bit more robust, but it still does not show that it's going to develop into anything significant at all. And this is just beyond the 5-day forecast. This is the latter part of the weekend into Sunday morning on the 3rd day of August. While we have a lot of stability problems because of this background northeasterly flow dragging in a lot of drier air from mid and high latitudes, that's been the problem, the stability problems existing here in the Atlantic. And then as we go forward out to 10 days, we have nothing out there, barely any tropical waves at all, which is a bit rambunctiously conservative. I think we will see more intense tropical wave activity given how consistent the Euro has been thus far on the development of intense tropical waves off of Africa. And then going beyond that, all the way out to 384 hours out, still nothing out there in the Atlantic. I mean, I'm telling you right now, I don't know if the GFS is smoking something, if it's asleep or what, but there is literally no tropical wave activity off of Africa because of how stable it is showing. In fact, it is so stable. If we look at our sea level pressure anomalies, things are higher than normal when sea level pressure, you convert that. And that's due to a lot of sinking air, which, again, I somewhat disagree with, given with what the European model has been showing. Looking at the Canadian model right now, this is another global model that I like to use in these videos. And as we move this forward, you can see there is that tropical wave approaching maybe the Greater and Lesser Antilles in about 5 days. So it looks like Saturday seems to be the time frame when that wave will get there. And it doesn't develop. It just doesn't develop in about 10 days. So there is great confidence amongst 4 models now that tropical development does not look likely. Only the artificial intelligence model is a lot more robust with this wave, as you can see here, versus our Canadian model that doesn't have anything in place. And our last but not least model here is the German model. This is the icon model that I like to use in these videos. And we can see clearly that the wave also does not end up developing very well at all. It is very shallow, as you can see here, with southeasterly flow here, northeasterly flow here, and there is the wave pocket because of stability problems in the Atlantic that remain. Now, going all the way out to 180 hours, this does not end up developing, at least as far as the eye can see here on the German model, because it's only a 7-day forecast model. We can't go beyond that. This is the furthest we can go out in time, and it does still show a very weak tropical wave transitioning across the Dominican Republic, Hispaniola, as well as the southeastern Bahamas. So now you might be wondering on why will this tropical wave off of Africa not develop into a tropical depression, tropical storm, or hurricane in the next 7 to 10 days? It has to do a lot with the deep layers of the atmosphere here and the environmental factors that are coming into play that might prevent this from developing any further. And one of those factors is the very dry, stable air that is in the Atlantic. And you can see that here on the European deterministic forecast, showing all of this brown shading here, indicating that the deep layers of the atmosphere extending all the way up into the mid-troposphere are very dry, the air is sinking, and it is stable. And tropical waves do not like that whatsoever. All right. And so when we put this into motion, you can see that there is a lot of dry air that gets involved with this wave as it moves generally westward. In fact, you can see how there's more drier air wrapping all the way around into the circulation, and whatever circulation there actually is there is going to be very weak. And that's why this wave is not going to do much at all. You can see it right here, kind of a cinnamon roll look, how that drier air is wrapping in from the western side. And that continues to be the case all the way over the next 7 days, where there is not much in the way of moisture left with this, and seeing moisture levels only around 60 to 70%, which is sort of ideal, but it could be a little more moist than that, with drier air wrapping or coming in on the backside of it too, ahead of our next tropical wave eventually. Another factor in all of this too is not just the drier air, but it's also the speed of how fast the 700 millibar flow is. This is what is known as the Eastern African jet. This is the time of the year where that jet is actually quite strong, and it's typical for that to occur because of how warm the northern portion of Africa is, and this is driven by a thermal gradient in the mid-levels of the atmosphere, and is also driven by Rossby wave anticyclonic wave breaking. We have this ridge over here just to the southeast of the Azores, which are up here. So this is a mid-level ridge at 700 millibars. And our wave is down here, and this is pretty much tangled up within this flow. What ends up happening is as we go over the next 3 days, this wave right here struggles, and that's because of the background easterly flow. Look how strong this is. This is pretty strong here in the mid-levels of the atmosphere, and a wave pocket cannot thrive very well because every time you get a little bit of a circulation or vorticity, it quickly wraps all the way around onto the upwind side and the downwind side. So what ends up happening here is this does not curl in. It does not consolidate very easily because of this type of wind pattern that we have with this very strong mid-level ridge to the north of the system. If this ridge was a lot weaker, the background mid-level wind environment was a lot weaker, then we could definitely see a tropical wave develop out of this. But in this case, it is not looking like that. And this is going to struggle because of the wind pattern that's getting involved. And that high moves in tandem with this trough, and it just tears it apart eventually. But what ends up happening later on in the period is it finds itself in weaker steering currents, so therefore development may occur after the 7-day forecast. Another factor in all of this too is not just the wind, but the deep layer vertical wind shear in the atmosphere. All right. So this is from 5,000 feet above the surface all the way up to 38 to 39,000 feet above the surface. So this is a deep layer column or a slice of the atmosphere looking at that vertical wind shear. Green and yellow and orange colors indicate deep layer vertical wind shear greater than 25 to 30 knots, which is very hostile for any tropical wave in this environment. Versus lighter colors like light blues, dark blues indicate vertical wind shear less than 20 knots. And so as we put this into motion here, vertical wind shear, while it is generally miraculously favorable, where the shear is generally under 5 to 10 knots, the vertical wind shear will rapidly increase as this gets closer to the Caribbean. And you can see it right here where our wave pocket is. It's kind of oriented like this. And so you can see westerly shear cutting across the system now at generally 25 to now 30 knots, because for one thing, our system is moving towards the west-northwest at about 20 to 25 miles an hour, with westerly flow aloft at around 5 to 10 miles per hour. So the net weight value here is relative deep layer vertical wind shear that is generally 25 to 30 knots, not very favorable for this wave to thrive within. Now, after that point, though, once it clears this area, it could find itself in a more conducive environment, as we do have a PVU streamer, as you can see right in here. So as it barrels through this, it could find itself in a much lighter vertical wind shear environment where it might be able to develop. And that, I mean, it might be able to develop under that circumstance, and it is to be announced if that will even occur. The latest European model does show lighter vertical wind shear in about 7 days, and that's why the system may have some time to develop before background environment becomes a little bit more hostile. Now, of course, depending on how much moisture there will be with these tropical waves as they transition across the MDR into the southwestern Atlantic will depend on how much rainfall actually accumulates. And so looking at the next 7 days of rainfall from the European deterministic forecast, in fact, we're just going to look at the ensemble because it's more accurate than just looking at one single model. And so you can see here over portions of, say, the Greater and Lesser Antilles, you could see anywhere between about a ½ inch to about 1.25 inches of rainfall. Now, of course, the windward sides of these islands generally favor best at seeing the heaviest rainfall, where you might see between about 1 inch to 2 inches of rainfall over the 7-day forecast period. Hispaniola, the Dominican Republic, as well as Puerto Rico and Jamaica could see up to about a ½ inch to 1 inch of rainfall. And then up here across the southeastern United States, like the Carolinas, you could see anywhere between about 1.5 inches to 2 inches of rainfall over the course of 7 days. And that's because there is going to be a lot of heavy rainfall out here across the southeastern United States, as we do watch the potential for a stalled frontal boundary that could enhance a lot of lift and thunderstorm activity, bringing the risk for heavy rainfall and some flooding, with the deep south here also seeing around 1 inch of rainfall in the course of 7 days. Now, with that being said, here's a look at the very latest 12Z European ensemble forecast projection, and there is very, very little signal out there, at least in this portion of the Atlantic, that there will not be any tropical development based on our members from the European ensemble forecast, which is good news. Just a few days ago, there were a lot of these lines headed this direction. So there's a lot less member support on this wave that's coming off of Africa that it will actually end up developing into tropical depression or tropical storm status. However, that is not to say after that point, we could see additional attempts here off of Africa. As we could already see here, there is more member support with more additional tropical development coming off of Africa in about 10 days. So in other words, after this tropical wave moves through the southwestern Atlantic, we are not done seeing any tropical development. As you can see here, there is still a chance beyond the 10-day forecast. The GEFS ensemble even agrees upon this and is, if not, way more aggressive with showing more additional attempts at tropical development in the next 10 days, as you can see here, with all of these blue lines indicating potential areas of formation of tropical-like systems based on members. And some of these do indicate tropical storm intensity as well. So once again, around the 7th of August and beyond, we are going to really need to watch the Atlantic extremely closely for the potential for additional tropical development beyond the tropical wave that we're currently seeing off of Africa. Because of this, the National Hurricane Center 7-day graphical tropical weather outlook does not indicate that there will be any tropical development in the next 7 days, which is really good. So a blank canvas, in other words, right now in the Atlantic. But I want to make it very clear here, beyond the 10-day forecast, we could be looking at additional areas of formation down here in the deep tropics, and the NHC could have highlighted areas out in the next 3 to 6 days based on ensemble guidance, and we will be watching those trends very closely. But again, for right now, looking pretty good out there in the Atlantic with no development in the next 7 days. It's a far different story when looking at the Central and Eastern Pacific Basin here. As you can see, we have one hurricane. This is Hurricane Iona, something like that. And then Kelly, now a tropical storm with winds here. It looks to be at 40 miles per hour. Both of these systems will be missing Hawaii well to the south, so there will not be any impacts with these disturbances whatsoever. Even our third disturbance here has a 60% chance of tropical development. This too does not look like it will impact Hawaii. So good news, if you are traveling to Hawaii over the next 7 days, things look very nice, very quiet, although some trade winds will be blowing across the region. And then, of course, we have another area to watch out there in the Eastern Pacific, which has a 90% chance of tropical development in the next 7 days. And this is part of that very intense convective coupled Kelvin wave that is currently transitioning across the Central and Eastern Pacific, followed by the MJO as well. This is going to be eventually moving into the Atlantic in the next 2 to 3 weeks. So in other words, when one basin is very active, the other basin is quiet, and vice versa. I bet you once we get into middle of August, things will flip very quickly. So now, with that being said, you're probably asking on when in the heck will the Atlantic hurricane season get very busy here? Will we see any very busy periods coming over the next 15 to 30 days? With that being said, here's a look at the European Ensemble Prediction System Control 200 millibar velocity potential anomaly. This is a Hov-Moeller diagram showing us what parts of the deep tropics will have sinking motion in the atmosphere and which areas will have lots of rising motion, enhanced convection, and thunderstorm activity, lowering your surface pressures and getting tropical cyclone genesis going. So with that being said, here's a look at that Hov-Moeller diagram. This is pretty much where we are at now. Let me box this in up here for you all so you guys can see that. So this is where we're at now, and we're going down the line here. So later we go down, or the bottom of this image is later in time. So we're increasing this. So we can see a lot of sinking motion now over the maritime continent, moving into the Western Pacific over the next 1 to 2 weeks, as you can see here, and then eventually moving into the Central and Eastern Pacific by the middle of August. In tandem to all of that, we have all of this rising motion, and that's why we have 2 named storms right now in the Central Pacific, with more than likely we're going to see more additional named storms going on in that basin over the next couple of weeks because of all of this rising motion, enhanced thunderstorm activity. But this is all going to be shifting eastward into the Atlantic basin and then eventually into Africa, where traditionally is where we get our very strong tropical waves from. And if the background state cooperates, we remove the stability problems, we remove the deep layer vertical wind shear, this could really allow for explosive tropical activity to develop in the Atlantic basin. Not always, but generally that's how it ends up being. And it comes down to other tropical factors: stability, sea surface temperature configurations, how much moisture there is in the atmosphere, and of course the vertical wind shear at the end of the day. And so what we end up seeing here is beyond the 5th, or roughly beyond the 7th or the 8th of August. So in this window that I'm drawing up here is very favorable for the Atlantic to get a lot of tropical waves off of Africa that are more robust, more healthier. And at the end of the day, that's how we get tropical depressions or storms under a favorable environment thermodynamically in the MDR. And it's a matter of time. Will things actually pick up under this favorable environment? And that's all. There's a lot that we don't know about right now because of what happened last year. And so it's going to be a matter of time when we start seeing activity. In general, most climate models do forecast that there will be an uptick in tropical activity in the Atlantic, and that's what I'm going with today's video, that beyond the 7th of August through the middle of August and perhaps at the end of August, we're going to see a lot of tropical activity, I'm afraid of, in the Atlantic. So we all need to be ready when that ends up happening. It's been a while since we last looked at our actual sea surface temperatures in much of the Atlantic basin, the Gulf, the southwestern Atlantic, and the Caribbean. As you can see here, the Gulf, the northwestern Caribbean, and the western Atlantic are running well above average for this time of the year. Sea surface temperatures in the mid to upper 80s, getting still close to 90 degrees in the northeastern Gulf. Because of how hot it's been there in the southeastern United States, I would not be surprised if we see further significant warming in this area over the course of the next 1 to 2 weeks. Versus out here, we have had slower warming, but sea surface temperature anomalies and sea surface temperatures themselves have rebounded quite quickly, and it's going to be a matter of time. How much recovery will we get by the middle to the end of August as we get closer and closer to the peak of hurricane season? Sea surface temperature anomalies are also very warm. As you can see here, much of the MDR is running well above average for this time of the year, but not as far above average as what we were dealing with last year. And that's going to be a key driver in how active will the season be. Subtropical and western portion there of the Atlantic running well above average, with sea surface temperatures nearly 2 degrees above the long-term average. The northeastern Gulf, the northwestern Caribbean also running about a degree or 2 above normal for this time of the year. So it's going to be interesting how this all evolves out here over the next 3 to 4 weeks as we near the peak of hurricane season. And then lastly, or of course not last but not least, is the upper ocean heat content. Of course, let's go to that. Upper ocean heat content is certainly near average to slightly above average in the Caribbean as well as in the Gulf. See, some of these white colors indicate upper ocean heat content is nearing 200 units, which is pretty substantial. And that's another words of saying how much heat is being stored below the surface of the ocean to give rise to the potential for intense to violent hurricanes should the background environment be quite conducive. And we can see that here, above average amounts of upper ocean heat content overall in the Caribbean, the southeastern Gulf, and the far western Atlantic here along the eastern seaboard of the peninsula of Florida into the Carolina coast, with near to above average upper ocean heat content in the MDR, which is pretty important. Now, of course, that's not the only thing we want to look at here is our sea surface temperature graph. As we have seen significant sea surface temperature warming over the last almost month here, actually pretty much in the last month. Look at how quickly this has really climbed. We are now running about a half a degree above normal in the eastern Atlantic. This does not include the MDR. As you can see here, the main development region is nearing that too, almost a degree above average. And the warming has really been steady to rapid since the middle to the end of June. Now, of course, looking at the Caribbean, we also have warmed up more gradually here, running also about 0.4 of a degree above average. So we are definitely not below average like we were back in the middle of June, and instead we are definitely above the long-term average. But anyways, if you haven't been here before and you did find today's detailed tropical weather outlook and discussion very helpful, detailed, informative, and life-saving, please don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel, folks. It really, really helps out a lot. We are literally 2,000 subscribers away from 50,000, halfway to 100,000 subscribers, folks. And I can't do this without all of your awesome, diligent support. you sharing this with your family and friends on social media. So once again, if you want to get all of my tropical weather updates here on this YouTube channel on a daily basis, including live streaming coverage of tropical storms or hurricanes as they make landfall within 24 to 36 hours in your area, including tropical live weather discussions too, please don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel, along to go with hitting the bell notification icon to get all of my tropical weather updates. Slap that like button, so give that like a huge nudge, and also leave a comment in the section below this video. But anyways, thank you all for watching this tropical weather outlook and discussion for Monday, July 28th, 2025. I'll be back with you more tomorrow with another detailed tropical weather outlook and discussion.